The room was dark and quiet, and Yuna was finally sleeping. She had not slept in 2 days. Her body was heavy against the mattress, and her breathing was slow and deep, and the whole world had gone away for a little while. It was the kind of sleep that feels like falling into warm water, the kind where you forget your own name. Then something bit her hair. It was not a big bite, it was a small bite. A tiny, sharp, needle-like bite that tugged at a single strand of hair near her left ear. Yuna made a sound in her throat and turned her head. The biting stopped. Then it started again, this time on the other side. She opened one eye. 3 pairs of glowing eyes stared back at her in the darkness. They were pale blue and slightly too large, and they blinked 1 pair at a time, like little stars turning on and off. Yuna's brain, still thick with sleep, took a moment to understand what she was looking at. Duri, Bomi, caught. The 3 Mireth cubs were sitting on her pillow in a neat row. Duri, the biggest and the bravest, had a strand of Yuna's hair still caught between his tiny front teeth. His 6 ears were all pointed forward. His bioluminescent tail was glowing a soft, steady blue, which meant he was very serious about something. Bomi, the middle one, was patting Yuna's cheek with her small 6-toed paw. Pat, 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 very gentle, very patient, very annoying. Kot, the smallest, was simply sitting on Yuna's chest and vibrating. It was a Mireth purr, but it was so strong that Yuna could feel it in her ribs. It was like having a small, furry engine sitting on her heart. "Briefing," said Duri. His voice was high and soft, and he said the word carefully, like he was carrying something fragile in his mouth. "Scheduled." "Late," added Bomi. "Pat, pat, pat, pat." Now, said Kot, and vibrated harder. Yuna sat up so fast that all 3 cubs tumbled off her chest and rolled across the blanket like small glowing balls. She grabbed her communicator from the bedside table and looked at the time. Her stomach dropped. She was 2 hours late. The diplomatic briefing with the Mireth Sovereignty Ambassador had started 2 hours ago, and she was the ranking officer, and she was still in her sleeping clothes with cub teeth marks in her hair. No, Yuna said. She threw the blanket off and stood up. The cubs immediately jumped off the bed and formed a line behind her. They always did this. Somi had explained it was imprinting behavior. Once Mireth cubs chose their pack leader, they followed that person everywhere. Everywhere. Even the bathroom. Especially the bathroom. Yuna pulled on her uniform jacket while hopping on 1 foot to get into her boots. She caught a glimpse of herself in the small mirror near the door. Her hair was sticking up in 6 directions. There was a small patch of bioluminescent drool on her collar from where Kot had been sleeping on her shoulder the night before. She looked like she had been raised by cats in a dumpster. There was no time to fix it. She opened the door and ran. The corridors of the UESS Dawning Star were long and silver, and hummed with the deep sound of the engines far below. Yuna moved fast, boots hitting the metal floor in hard, quick steps. Behind her, 3 sets of small paws made a rapid clicking sound as the cubs kept up. Duri was in front of the other 2, ears flat against his head for speed. Bomi was in the middle, her tail streaming behind her like a little blue torch. Kot was last, his short legs working twice as hard, making a small squeaking sound with every breath. Tejo stepped out of the engine bay just as Yuna came around the corner. He was holding 2 cups of coffee. He did not look surprised. He never looked surprised. Tejo had the kind of face that suggested he had already seen everything the universe had to offer, and had decided it was all mildly amusing. "You're late," he said. "I know," she replied. "Ambassador Garam arrived on time." "I know. She is not happy." "I know, Tejo." He handed her one of the coffees and fell into step beside her. He looked down at the three cubs running between their feet. "Cot has something on his face," he said. "It's toothpaste. He ate my toothpaste again." "That explains the foam." They reached the briefing room doors. Yuna stopped. She took a breath. She drank half the coffee in one long swallow. She looked at Taeho. "How bad is it in there?" she asked. "Jiho has been giving a presentation on the ship's water recycling system for the last 45 minutes. Nobody asked for that. Nobody asked for that. But it is very detailed, and the ambassador is too polite to tell him to stop. I think she is considering violence." Yuna pushed the doors open. The briefing room was a wide, curved space with a long table and a wall of windows that showed the black of space and the distant light of stars. Jiho was standing at the front of the room, next to a large screen that showed a very complicated diagram of pipes. He was pointing at a pipe. His face was completely serious. At the far end of the table sat Ambassador Garam. Garam was tall. Even sitting she was tall. She was Mireth, which meant she looked like what would happen if a large cat had decided to become a person, and had done it with great dignity and no sense of humor. Her fur was dark silver. Her eyes were gold and narrow and cold. She had 4 arms, all of them folded across her chest. Her 6 ears were pressed flat against her skull, which Yuna knew from Somi's briefings meant she was either angry or about to be angry. Garam looked at Yuna. Then she looked at the 3 cubs who had trotted in behind Yuna and were now sitting at her feet in their neat little row. Garam's gold eyes narrowed further. "Lieutenant Commander," Garam said. Her voice was deep and smooth and carried the weight of someone who was used to being obeyed. "You are late." "I apologize, Ambassador. I had a briefing," said Duri helpfully from the floor. Garam stared at the cub. The cub stared back. "These are the children," Garam said. It was not a question. "Yes, Duri, Bomi, and Kot." Garam stood. She was very tall when she stood. She moved around the table with the slow, liquid grace of all Mireth, and she came to stand in front of the 3 cubs. She lowered herself to one knee and extended one of her 4 hands toward them. It was a traditional Mireth greeting, a gesture of kinship. Duri hissed. Bomi pressed herself flat against Yuna's boot. Kot turned around and buried his face in Yuna's ankle. In Mireth culture, for a cub to reject the greeting of an elder was one of the deepest insults possible. It meant the cub did not recognize the elder as family. It meant the elder was a stranger. Garam's hand hung in the air for a long, terrible moment. Then she pulled it back. She stood up. Her face had not changed, but something behind her eyes had gone very dark and very still. "I see," she said. Somi stepped forward. She had been sitting quietly in the corner taking notes, and now she spoke carefully. "Ambassador, the cubs were recovered from extreme trauma conditions. Their imprinting response attached to the first safe presence they encountered after rescue, which was Lieutenant Commander Yuna. This is a known biological response in Mireth young. It is not a rejection of Mireth identity. It is a survival mechanism." "I am aware of how my own species functions," Garam said quietly. Bomi chose this exact moment to start chewing on Yuna's boot. Garam watched this. Her jaw tightened. Then she turned to Yuna and said the words that made the whole room go cold. "I am here to take them home. They are Mireth nationals. They belong with their people." Yuna looked down at the 3 small cubs at her feet. Duri was pressed against her leg. Bomi was still chewing her boot. Kot had fallen asleep against her ankle, his small body vibrating with a purr, his tail glowing the soft blue color that meant he felt safe. And Yuna, who was tired and messy and 2 hours late and had cub drool on her collar, felt something in her chest go tight and stubborn and absolutely still. She looked at Ambassador Garam. "With respect, Ambassador," she said, "I think we should discuss that." The argument lasted 3 hours. Garam wanted the cubs on her ship by the end of the day. Yuna wanted them to stay until a proper hearing could be arranged through the Venaccord, the galactic coalition that handled disputes between species. Garam called this a delay tactic. Yuna called it due process. Garam said humans had no right to keep Myrith children. Yuna said the children were not being kept. They were being cared for. There was a difference. In the end, it was Somi who settled it. She pulled up the xenobiology records on the briefing room screen and showed Garam what they both already knew. Myrith cubs who had undergone trauma imprinting could not be forcibly separated from their chosen protector without severe psychological damage. The bond was not emotional. It was biological. Their nervous systems had physically wired themselves to Yuna's presence. Separating them now would be like cutting a wire in their brains. Garam stood very still for a long time. Then she said she would request a formal hearing through the Venaccord, and that she expected the cubs to be delivered to Myrith custody immediately after the ruling. She left the briefing room without looking at the cubs. She did not look at Yuna either. When the door closed, Jiho let out a long breath. "That went well," he said. "She hates us," said Hana from her station in the corner. "She doesn't hate us," Yuna said. She sat down heavily in her chair, and Caught immediately climbed into her lap and curled into a ball. "She's embarrassed. There's a difference." Teho leaned against the wall and crossed his arms. "Embarrassed about what?" Yuna rubbed her eyes. "About owing us. The Myrith are proud people, very proud, and we did something for them that they couldn't do for themselves. It's harder for them." The room went quiet. Everyone was thinking about the same thing. Nobody wanted to say it out loud, but they were all thinking about the rescue. 11 days ago, the UESS Dawning Star had received a distress signal from the edge of Myrith space. A colony ship carrying 300 Myrith civilians had been attacked and destroyed. By the time the Dawning Star arrived, there were already 6 other ships from different species holding position around the wreckage. None of them had moved in. Yuna had stood on the bridge and looked at the broken remains of the colony ship drifting in the black of space, and she had asked the obvious question: "Why isn't anyone going in?" Teho had checked the readings, and his face had changed in a way Yuna had never seen before. He was not a man whose face changed easily. "Keth radiation," he said. "The whole wreckage field is soaked in it. The Hollow must have used Keth warheads." Keth radiation was the quiet killer of space. It moved through walls. It moved through shields. It moved through living cells and turned them off one by one, like someone walking through a house, switching off all the lights. Every known species in the galactic community was fatally vulnerable to Keth radiation. 30 seconds of exposure would kill a Myrith. 2 minutes would kill a Ven. The other species had even less time. Except humans. Humans were not immune to Keth radiation. It made them sick. It gave them headaches and nosebleeds and a deep, unpleasant feeling in their bones, like their skeleton was vibrating at the wrong frequency. Prolonged exposure could cause serious damage, but it took about 40 minutes before the effects became dangerous. 40 minutes that no other species in the galaxy had. Yuna had looked at the wreckage. She had looked at the 6 ships floating at a safe distance, watching, waiting for the radiation to fade in 3 or 4 days. "Are there life signs?" she asked. Teho checked. 3. Very faint, very small. Children. They were children. Yuna did not ask for permission. She did not file a report. She did not consult with the other ships. She went to the suit locker and started getting dressed. Jiho found her there. He was already holding his own suit. "You're not going alone," he said. "You don't have to come." "I know I don't have to. That's why I'm coming." They went through the airlock together. The wreckage was dark and twisted and wrong in the way that only destroyed ships are wrong. The metal was bent in shapes that metal should not bend into. The corridors that were supposed to be straight were curved and broken, and filled with floating debris. The emergency lights had died long ago. Their suit lights cut through the blackness in thin white beams. They found the bodies first. Yuna tried not to look at them. Jiho said nothing. They moved through the ship, following the faint life signs on their scanners. The radiation was already making Yuna's head hurt. A dull pressure behind her eyes, like someone pressing their thumbs into her skull. 20 minutes in, they found the cargo bay. There was a small radiation-shielded pod in the corner. It was designed to protect sensitive equipment during transport. Someone in the last moments of the attack had put 3 cubs inside it and sealed the door. The shielding was failing. The power indicator was blinking red. In another hour, the shielding would collapse, and the radiation would get in, and the 3 small lives inside would go out like candles. Yuna pulled at the door. It was jammed. The frame had warped in the explosion. She pulled harder. Her suit gloves tore on the sharp metal. She could feel the edges cutting into her fingers, but she did not stop. Jiho grabbed the other side, and they pulled together, and the door came open with a sound like a scream. Inside, 3 cubs were huddled in a pile. They were so small, smaller than Yuna had expected. Their fur was matted, and their tails were dark, not glowing at all, which meant they were terrified beyond the ability to produce light. 6 pairs of enormous eyes looked up at Yuna. She reached in and picked up the smallest one, Caught. She did not know his name yet. He was shaking so hard she could feel it through her torn gloves. She held him against her chest, and his 6 ears pressed flat, and he made a sound, a tiny, broken sound that was not a word in any language, but that meant the same thing in all of them. Help me, please help me. Jiho took the other 2. Duri bit him immediately, but Jiho just held them tighter and said a word that Yuna pretended not to hear. They walked back through the dead ship. 31 minutes of radiation exposure. Yuna's nose was bleeding inside her helmet. The blood floated in small red drops in front of her eyes. She could not wipe it away. She just kept walking. Caught had buried his face in her chest and gone still, not sleeping, but hiding, pressing himself as close to her heartbeat as he could get. When they came out of the airlock and back onto the dawning star, Somi was waiting with medical equipment and blankets. Taeho was standing behind her. He looked at Yuna's torn gloves and her bleeding hands and the small alien creature pressed against her chest, and he did not say anything. He just took off his jacket and wrapped it around the cub. That was 11 days ago. 6 ships from 6 different species had watched 2 humans walk into radiation that would have killed anyone else in the galaxy. They had recorded it. Within hours, the footage was on every communication network in the known galaxy. Billions of beings across hundreds of worlds watched a human woman tear open a metal door with her bare hands to reach 3 children she had never met. And now, 11 days later, Yuna sat in the briefing room of the dawning star, with a sleeping cub in her lap and toothpaste foam on her collar, and 7 formal inquiries from 7 species sitting in her message queue, all asking the same question. Why did you go in? That night, after the cubs were asleep in their usual pile on her bunk, Taeho came by with tea. He sat in the chair by the door, and Yuna sat on the floor with her back against the bed, close enough that the cubs could feel her warmth. 7 species, Taeho said. 7 formal diplomatic inquiries. All the same question. I read them. What are you going to tell them? Yuna looked at her hands. The cuts from the torn gloves had healed, but the skin was still pink and new. I don't understand the question, she said. Taeho smiled. It was a small smile, the kind that stayed mostly in his eyes. I know you don't, he said. That's the part they can't figure out. On the bed, Duri shifted in his sleep, and his tail flickered a soft, warm blue. Bomi made a small sound, something like a sigh. Caught was in the middle of the pile, invisible except for the tip of his glowing tail, safe and warm, and surrounded on all sides by the people and the small warm bodies that had become his world. Outside the window, the stars were cold and distant and infinite. And somewhere out in that darkness, something was watching and waiting, and very angry that 3 small lights were still glowing. The footage would not stop spreading. Hana sat at her communication station and watched the numbers climb. Every few minutes, she refreshed the tracker, and every few minutes, the numbers were higher. The video of Yuna and Jiho walking into the wrecked Mirith colony ship had been viewed, shared, translated, and discussed on over 90 planetary networks in 6 days. Species that had never heard of Earth were now searching for it on their star maps. "We're trending on the Venn Cultural Exchange Network," Hana said to no one in particular. "Someone on a planet I can't pronounce made a song about us." "Is it a good song?" Taeho asked from his station. "I think it's a funeral hymn, but like a respectful one." The reactions were not all respectful. Some species were genuinely amazed. Some were confused. Some were frightened. One ambassador from a species called the Daleth had given a public statement calling humans the most reckless and irresponsible species to ever achieve space travel. Another ambassador from the Kaore Federation had said something different. She called humans the ones who run toward the thing that is killing them. It was meant as a criticism, an observation about human stupidity, a warning to other species that these strange, soft, short-lived creatures from a small blue planet did not understand danger the way normal beings did. Within 2 days, human ships across the galaxy had painted the phrase on their hulls. T-shirts were printed on 3 space stations. Taeho had one delivered to his quarters. He wore it under his uniform jacket. Yuna did not pay much attention to any of this. She was too busy trying to keep Duri from eating the wiring in the walls. The cubs were growing, not in size, not yet, but in confidence. In the first days after the rescue, they had been silent and still and afraid. They had clung to Yuna like she was the only solid thing in a universe that had tried to break them. But now, 11 days later, they were starting to become themselves. Duri was curious about everything and afraid of nothing. He had already figured out how to open doors by jumping on the control panel, and had escaped Yuna's quarters 3 times. He liked to sit on Jiho's shoulder during tactical briefings and bat at the lights on the screens. He had bitten every member of the crew at least once, which Somi said was a sign of affection. Bomi was quieter, but watchful. She followed Hana everywhere, and had learned more human words than the other 2. She had a habit of repeating things she heard at exactly the wrong moment. During a formal call with another ship, she had clearly and loudly said, "Oh no," in perfect imitation of Taeho's voice. The other ship's captain had been very confused. Kot was the smallest and the softest, and the one who slept the most. He had chosen Yuna completely and absolutely. He slept on her chest, rode on her shoulder, and if she left a room without him, he would sit by the door and make a sound so sad that even Jiho, who claimed to have no feelings about the cubs at all, would pick him up and carry him to find her. It was on the 7th day after the briefing with Garam that everything changed. Yuna was in her quarters. It was late. The cubs were asleep on the bed. She was reading through the formal requirements for the Venn Accord hearing, when her communicator beeped. It was Hana. "Commander, you need to come to the bridge. Now." Yuna knew that tone. She had heard it only a few times, and it never meant anything good. She reached the bridge in 4 minutes. The cubs, awakened by her sudden movement, followed at her heels. The bridge crew was already assembled. Taeho was at his station, his face tight. Jiho was standing at the tactical display, his jaw locked. Hana was at communications, her hands moving fast over her controls. "What happened?" Yuna asked. Hana put the message on the main screen. It was a transmission, short, encrypted, broadcast on a frequency that should not have been possible to access from outside the ship. The voice was not a voice Yuna recognized. It was flat and cold, and it spoke in a language that the ship's translator processed with a slight delay. To the vessel carrying Mireth specimens designate Duri, Bomi, Kot. Bloodline confirmation requested. Confirm termination or confirm location. You have 1 cycle. The bridge was silent. The hollow, Jiho said. His voice was very calm, which meant he was very angry. Yuna stared at the message. They know the cubs' names. She had come to the bridge from her lab and was holding a datapad. Her face was pale. I've been running the cubs' genetic profiles against the Mireth cultural database. I should have done it sooner, but I was focused on their health, and I didn't think to check their lineage. She held up the datapad. These are not ordinary children, Commander. Their genetic markers match the oldest royal bloodline in the Mireth sovereignty. The direct line, the line of succession. The room got very quiet. These 3 cubs, Somi continued, are the last surviving heirs of the Mireth ruling family. Every other member of that bloodline was on the colony ship. The Hollow didn't attack a random target. They attacked that ship specifically. They were trying to end this bloodline. Yuna looked at the 3 cubs sitting at her feet. Duri was chewing on his own tail. Bomi was looking at the blinking lights on Hana's console with great interest. Kot was asleep. The last of the royal line. And the thing that had killed their entire family had just sent a message asking if they were dead yet. Yuna's hands tightened at her sides. Jiho, she said, what do we know about the Hollow's fleet strength in this sector? 3 confirmed warships within 2 cycles travel, possibly more beyond sensor range. And the Mireth? How many ships does Garam have? Jiho shook his head. 1 diplomatic vessel, light escort class. The Mireth lost 3 combat ships last month to Hollow raids. Their fleet is stretched to the point of breaking. Teho spoke from his station. If we hand the cubs to Garam, we're putting them on the weakest ship in the sector. The Hollow would go through Garam's escort like paper. Yuna nodded. She had already known this. She had known it since the moment the message appeared on the screen. Hana, open a channel to Earth Command. Priority 1. What are you going to request? A human escort fleet. 4 ships. Armed. I want them here within 5 cycles. The bridge went still. Jiho looked at her. If we put human warships around these cubs, and the Hollow attacks anyway, that's an act of war against Earth, against all of humanity. I know. You're betting that the Hollow won't risk it. I'm betting that the Hollow has never fought humans. I'm betting that they've studied every species in this part of the galaxy, and they have tactics for all of them. But they don't have tactics for us. They don't know what we'll do, and that uncertainty is the best shield these children have right now. Teho watched her from his station, and if you're wrong, if they attack anyway, Yuna looked at him. Then they'll learn. The channel to Earth Command opened. Yuna made her request. She explained the situation clearly and simply. 3 children, last of their bloodline. A hostile force coming to kill them. She needed ships. The response came in 40 minutes. 4 vessels of the United Earth Space Navy were being redirected to her position. Expected arrival in 4 cycles. The commanding officer of the lead ship sent a personal message ahead of the fleet. It was 1 line. On our way. Nobody touches those kids. That night, Yuna sat on her bunk. The cubs were arranged around her in their usual pattern. Duri against her left side, Bomi against her right, Kot in her lap. Their tails were glowing softly. The room was warm with the light of 6 small suns. Somewhere out in the dark, 3 hollow warships were moving closer. Somewhere behind her, 4 human warships were burning hard to reach her. And somewhere in a Mireth diplomatic vessel, holding position 2,000 kilometers away, Ambassador Garam was sitting alone and wondering how it had come to this. How the fate of her people's oldest bloodline had ended up in the hands of a species that had been in space for less than 200 years. Yuna stroked Kot's ears, and he purred so hard the bed vibrated. I won't let them touch you, she said quietly. Any of you. Not ever. Dury opened one eye, looked at her, and bit her thumb, gently. Then he went back to sleep. The Ven Accord hearing chamber was the largest room Yuna had ever been in. It was built into a station that floated between 3 star systems, a place that belonged to no species and all species at the same time. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into shadow. The walls curved in a wide circle, and every section held seats for a different species. There were tall, narrow seats for the Daleth, who were thin and long. There were wide, low platforms for the Kiori, who preferred to sit close to the ground. There were tanks of liquid for the Voss, who breathed water. There were at least 40 different species present, each in their own section, each watching. They were all watching because of 3 small cubs and the human woman who had carried them out of the dark. Yuna stood at the central platform. She was wearing her dress uniform, which she had pressed 3 times that morning, because Dury had slept on it twice. Her hands were steady at her sides. Behind her, sitting on a small bench that had been brought in specially, were Dury, Bomi, and Kot. Somi sat with them, ready to help if they became frightened. On the other side of the platform stood Ambassador Garam. She was wearing formal Mireth ceremonial robes, deep black, with silver thread that caught the light when she moved. Her forearms were folded. Her 6 ears were high and still. She looked like a statue carved from something old and proud. The Accord moderator was a being Yuna had never met before. It was a Palan, a species that looked like a tree had decided to walk around and ask people questions. It had no face that Yuna could identify, but it had a voice that was deep and calm, and carried easily across the vast chamber. This hearing concerns the custody and protection of 3 Mirith miners, designations Dury, Bomi, and Kot, currently in the care of Lieutenant Commander Yuna of the United Earth spaceship Dawning Star. Ambassador Garam of the Mirith Sovereignty has filed for immediate transfer of custody to Mirith Authority. Lieutenant Commander Yuna has filed for continued human protective custody pending resolution of the ongoing threat from the entity known as the Hollow. Both parties will speak. Garam spoke first. She was magnificent. There was no other word for it. She spoke of Mirith history, of the bloodline that stretched back 10,000 years, of the traditions and the songs and the stories that these 3 cubs were born to carry forward. She spoke of cultural identity and the right of every species to raise their own children in their own way. She spoke of how the Mirith had survived wars and plagues and the death of stars, and they would survive this too. She spoke for 20 minutes, and when she finished, the chamber was silent with respect. Then it was Yuna's turn. She stood at the platform and looked out at the 40 species watching her. And she did not give a speech. She had written a speech. Hana had helped her with it. It was a good speech about legal precedent and biological imprinting and the tactical situation with the Hollow. But standing there, with the weight of all those alien eyes on her, Yuna put the speech away. I'm not going to talk about law, she said, and I'm not going to talk about politics. I'm going to talk about Dury, Bomi, and Kot. She paused. The chamber waited. Dury steals socks. I don't know why. He takes them from the laundry room and hides them under my bed. He has 14 socks under there right now, and he guards them like their treasure. He also bites people when he likes them. He bit our chief engineer on the first day, and now he sits on his shoulder every morning during coffee. A few sounds from the audience. Hard to tell what species they came from. Bomi is afraid of loud noises. When the engine makes a sound she doesn't expect, she hides behind the nearest person's legs. She is also learning our language faster than anyone thought possible. Last week, she told our tactical officer that his hair looked like a dead animal. She was right, but it was still rude, and we talked about it. More sounds. Some of them might have been laughter. Kot is the smallest. He falls asleep in the middle of everything. Meals, briefings, he fell asleep during a fire drill. He is also the bravest of the three, because he was the first one to stop flinching when someone reached for him. That took him 4 days. 4 days to decide that hands reaching for him might not hurt him. 4 days is very fast for a child who watched everything he knew get destroyed. The chamber was very quiet now. "I don't care about bloodlines," Yuna said. "I don't care about succession or politics or who has the legal right to these children. I care that they were scared and alone in the dark, and they chose to trust me. I care that Duri sleeps pressed against my side because he feels safe there. I care that Bomi says my name wrong, and I never want her to say it right, because the way she says it is perfect. I care that Kot has nightmares, and the only thing that stops them is the sound of my heartbeat." She looked at Garam. "I know they are Mireth. I know they belong to your people, and your history, and your future. I am not trying to take them from you. I am trying to keep them alive long enough to grow up. That is all I want. That is the only thing I have ever wanted since the moment I found them." The moderator turned to the cubs. This was a formality. Standard Accord procedure required that minors be given the opportunity to speak, but no one expected much from 3 small children who had only recently learned any human words at all. She was shaking slightly, but she stood tall, and her voice was clear. "She came in the dark for us. And then Kot, small Kot, who slept through everything and was afraid of nothing because he had already survived the worst thing that could happen to him." Kot did not speak. He climbed off the bench, walked across the floor, climbed up Yuna's leg, and settled into her lap. He curled into a ball, and his tail glowed warm blue, and he closed his eyes. The chamber was completely silent. Garam stood very still. Her forearms had dropped to her sides. Something had changed in her face. The pride was still there, but it was not the same pride as before. It was not the pride of a nation claiming what belonged to it. It was something older and deeper and more painful than that. In Mireth culture, a cub's choice of pack leader was sacred. It could not be bought or forced or argued away. When a cub chose, that was final. It was written into the deepest laws of Mireth civilization, laws older than their space travel, older than their cities, older than almost everything. The cubs had chosen. After the hearing was adjourned, Garam found Yuna in the corridor outside. Yuna was sitting on a bench. Kot was in her lap. Duri was trying to steal a passing diplomat's scarf. Bomi was watching the water tank of the Voss delegation with intense fascination. Garam stood in front of Yuna for a moment, without speaking. Then she did something Yuna did not expect. She sat down on the bench beside her. Not across from her. Beside her. "I have fought this for the wrong reasons," Garam said quietly. "I fought because my pride told me to. Because admitting that a human could protect Mireth children better than the Mireth felt like a wound I could not bear." Yuna said nothing. She waited. "Our fleet is broken," Garam said. "The Hollow has taken 7 of our colony worlds in 2 years. We cannot protect our own borders. I knew when I came here that I could not protect these children. I knew it, and I came anyway, because the alternative was to admit that we needed you, and I could not do that." She looked at Kot, sleeping in Yuna's lap. "Can you keep them safe?" "Yes," Yuna said. "Promise me." "I promise." Garam nodded slowly. She started to stand, then stopped. "Your speech," she said. "The one about socks and nightmares. It wasn't really a speech. It was the most dangerous weapon I have ever seen deployed in a courtroom." Something appeared on Garam's face. It might have been the beginning of a smile. "You are a strange species." Then the alarms went off. The sound cut through the station like a knife. Red lights began spinning on every wall. Yuna's communicator screamed to life with Jiho's voice, tight and hard and ready. 3 hollow warships just dropped out of faster than light at the edge of the system. They're heading for the station. Estimated arrival, 38 minutes. Yuna stood up. Kot woke and gripped her collar. Duri and Bomi ran to her feet and pressed close. Their tails were flickering with fear. She looked at Garam. Garam looked at her. 38 minutes, Yuna said. What will you do? Yuna picked up Bomi with one arm, and Duri with the other. Kot clung to her shoulder, his small claws digging into her jacket. She held all three of them against her chest, and she looked at Garam with the calm, steady expression of someone who has already decided exactly what she is going to do, and is simply waiting for the universe to catch up. I'm going to my ship, she said, and I'm going to stand between them and my kids. She walked toward the docking bay. Behind her, Garam watched her go. 3 small glowing tails bobbed over Yuna's shoulders, bright against the red emergency lights. Garam whispered something in Mireth, a word that had no translation in any human language. It meant something close to, the one who holds the fire and will not let go, even as it burns. Then she followed Yuna to the docks. The bridge of the dawning star was loud with voices and alarms, and the sound of boots on metal flooring. Yuna came through the door with 3 cubs on her body, and her crew already in motion around her. Jiho was at tactical. Hana was at communications. Teho was already running toward the engine room, pulling off his jacket as he went. Status, Yuna said. She set the cubs down on the floor behind her chair. Duri immediately sat up straight, with his ears forward, watching the screens like he understood what was happening. Bomi pressed against Kot and wrapped her tail around him. Kot was shaking, but he was awake. He was watching Yuna. 3 hollow warships inbound, Jiho reported. Heavy class, weapons hot. They're not even trying to hide their approach. They want us to see them coming. Our escort fleet? 4 human ships, already moving to intercept formation. Captain Minho, on the Gallant, is requesting orders from you. Yuna sat down in her command chair. On the main screen, the black of space was dotted with lights. The station behind them, huge and slow. The 4 human escort ships, already pulling forward in a wide arc. And beyond them, coming fast, 3 dark shapes that did not reflect the starlight. The hollow ships looked like wounds in space. They were long and sharp, and built from something that swallowed light instead of reflecting it. No windows, no markings, nothing that suggested anything alive was inside. They moved in perfect formation, 3 points of a triangle, heading straight for the station, where 40 species representatives were watching from behind shielded glass. Open a channel to the escort fleet, Yuna said. Hana opened the channel. 4 voices came through, each from a different ship. Captain Minho from the Gallant, steady and clear. Commander Unji from the Reliant, sharp and quick. Captain Dowin from the Unbroken, low and calm. And Lieutenant Nari from the Stillwater, young and bright and ready. This is Dawning Star Actual, Yuna said. The Hollow is here for 3 Mirith children aboard my ship. They are not going to reach my ship. Formation Diamond, Dawning Star at center. Weapons free on my order. Gallant takes point. Understood, Dawning Star, said Minho. Gallant moving to point. It's been a quiet month. I was getting bored. The 4 escort ships moved forward. Not cautiously, not slowly. They accelerated toward the incoming hollow fleet, with the engines at full power, spreading into a diamond formation, with the Dawning Star protected at the center. The station behind them went quiet on all channels. 40 species were watching. Every one of them had seen the hollow attack before. The pattern was always the same. The hollow came in fast and hard and overwhelming, and whatever was in front of them scattered. Ships broke formation. That was how it always worked. The hollow were predators, and predators relied on their prey to run. The human ships did not run. They accelerated. Teho's voice came over the internal channel from the engine room. Commander, I'm pushing the reactor past rated limits. You've got about 12 minutes of power we're technically not supposed to have. Use it fast, because after that, we'll be running on good intentions and strong language. 12 minutes is plenty, Yuna said. Is it? It's going to have to be. The Hollow fleet was close now. Close enough that the sensors could see them clearly. Each ship was twice the size of a human escort vessel. Their weapons systems were advanced, designed for overwhelming force against targets that were running away. They were not designed for targets that were running toward them. The Gallant reached weapons range first. Minho did not wait for the Hollow to fire. The Gallant opened up with everything it had, a full forward barrage that lit up the darkness like a second sun. The Reliant and the Unbroken flanked wide, cutting off the Hollow's ability to spread their formation. The Stillwater dropped low, coming up from beneath the Hollow triangle at an angle that no tactical manual would recommend, because it was too aggressive and too close. The Hollow fleet hesitated. It was a small hesitation, half a second, a momentary break in the perfect formation. But in combat, half a second was everything. It meant they were confused. It meant they had expected the human ships to fall back to defensive positions around the station. It meant they had war plans for every species they had ever fought, and not one of those plans included an enemy that charged. Jiho was watching the tactical display with a focus so intense it seemed to be holding the ship together by willpower alone. Hollow lead ship is adjusting course. They're trying to pull back to long range. They want to use their size advantage. Don't let them, Yuna said. Minho is already on it. Gallant is staying close, really close, uncomfortably close. The battle was fast and brutal, and nothing like what the watching species had seen before. Human combat doctrine was built on something that other species found difficult to understand. It was built on trust. The 4 human ships did not follow a central algorithm. They did not wait for coordinated commands. Each captain made decisions in the moment, trusting the others to adapt, trusting their instincts, trusting each other. They moved like a pack of wolves that had been hunting together for years, except they had met each other only 4 days ago. The Unbroken took a heavy hit along its port side. The damage was serious. The ship listed, trailing atmosphere and debris. Commander Dowan's voice came over the channel, calm as ever. Unbroken is damaged, but operational. We're repositioning. Repositioning. The Unbroken swung its damaged bulk between the Hollow lead ship and the station. It used itself as a shield. It sat there, burning and broken and still fighting, blocking the Hollow's line of attack with its own body. The Reliant and the Stillwater used the opening. They hit the second Hollow ship from 2 sides simultaneously. Something inside the Hollow vessel cracked and split, and the ship began to drift, power failing, weapons going dark. On the bridge of the Dawning Star, the cubs were huddled behind Yuna's chair. Duri was pressed flat against the floor, ears back, watching. Bomi had her paws over her eyes. Kot had climbed into Yuna's lap at some point during the battle, and was sitting there, pressed against her stomach, eyes wide. Hana, Yuna said, open a channel to the Hollow command ship. All frequencies. I want everyone to hear this. Hana's hands moved. Channel open. Yuna spoke. Her voice was steady and calm, and carried across every frequency in the sector. Every species on the station heard it. Every ship in the system heard it. The Hollow heard it. This is Lieutenant Commander Yuna of the UESS Dawning Star. You came here for 3 children. You found their mother. Leave now, or don't. We are fine either way. The Hollow command ship scanned the Dawning Star. The scan was thorough and quick. It would have shown them everything. The ship's layout, the crew, the weapons, and on the bridge, 1 human woman sitting in a command chair with 3 small Mireth cubs in her lap. The cubs were asleep, not pretending to sleep, not frozen with fear, asleep. Kot was curled against Yuna's chest, with his tail glowing warm blue. Dury had crawled up at some point and was tucked under her arm. Bomi was draped across her knee, eyes closed, completely still. They had fallen asleep during a battle, because they were with Yuna, and Yuna was there, and that meant everything was going to be okay. The Hollow Fleet looked at this for 11 seconds. 11 seconds of silence on every channel. Then they turned and left. The warships pulled back, collected their damaged vessel, and vanished into faster-than-light travel. They did not send a message. They did not threaten. They simply left. On the station, 40 species sat in silence. Then, slowly, a sound began. It was hard to tell which species started it. It might have been the Kaori. It might have been the Palan. It might have been all of them at once. A sound that was not applause and not cheering, but something older. A sound of recognition. A sound that meant, "We see what you are." The dawning star returned to dock 6 hours later. The damage to the escort fleet was real, but manageable. Nobody on any human ship had died. Darwin sent a message to Yuna that said simply, "Worth it." On the docking platform, Garam was waiting. She stood alone. Her ceremonial robes were gone. She was wearing simple traveling clothes. Her forearms were at her sides. She looked tired, for the first time since Yuna had met her. Yuna walked down the ramp with the cubs. They were awake now and trotting at her heels in their usual line. Dury was in front, tail high. Bomi was in the middle, looking around at everything. Kot was last, his small legs working hard to keep up. Garam watched them come. Then she looked at Yuna. "Every species in this sector has been asking the same question since your rescue of these children," Garam said. "Why did you go in? Why did you fight? Why do you do the things you do?" She paused. "I would like to know the answer." Yuna looked down at the 3 cubs at her feet. Dury was chewing on her bootlace. Bomi was sniffing Garam's robes with careful curiosity. Kot had sat down on Yuna's foot and was leaning against her ankle, with his eyes half closed. "Because they're small," Yuna said, "and they were scared, and we could help. That's it. That's all it's ever been." Garam stared at her. For a long, long moment, the Mirith ambassador simply looked at this human, and these 3 small cubs who had chosen her, and the simple, impossible truth of what she had just said. Then Garam bowed, deep and slow, and with all 4 arms crossed over her chest, in the Mirith gesture of highest respect, a gesture that had never been given to a human before in all the long history of the sovereignty. Yuna bowed back. Kot fell off her foot and squeaked. 6 months later, Yuna woke to tiny teeth pulling her hair. The room was warm, and the lights were off, and 3 pairs of glowing eyes were staring at her in the darkness. They were bigger now. The cubs were growing. Dury's ears almost reached Yuna's shoulder when he stood on his back legs. Bomi could say 47 human words and used most of them incorrectly on purpose because she had learned what funny meant. Kot still slept too much and still purred too hard and still climbed into Yuna's lap during every briefing like he belonged there, which he did. "Briefing," said Dury. "Scheduled." "Late," said Bomi. Again. Now," said Kot. Yuna groaned. She smiled. She got up. Teho was at the door with coffee. He was wearing his "the ones who run toward" shirt. He handed her the cup and looked at the 3 cubs trotting behind her, and he smiled his quiet smile. 12 species have requested human protection pacts, he said. The Mireth sovereignty has opened full diplomatic relations with Earth. First time ever. And the Hollow has pulled back from this entire sector. "Good," said Yuna, and drank her coffee. They walked down the corridor together. The human and the engineer and the 3 small glowing creatures that had changed everything. Behind them, through the windows, the stars burned cold and far away. And somewhere in that vast and ancient and often cruel galaxy, A simple truth was spreading from world to world, from species to species, carried not by weapons or treaties or power, but by the footage of a woman walking into the dark for 3 children she had never met. Don't go after something a human has decided to protect. They will come for it. They will hold it. And they will not, for any reason, let go.